I've never seen a bomb drop. I've never felt hunger. I've also never seen lightning strike, but we've all had the heard thunder, and it doesn't take a genius to tell something's burning. The debate community is burning. The status quo politics of our community are rooted in a friend-enemy dichotomy where if you're not with us, you're against us. It's that kind of static understanding of relations that has forced positionalities that don't then in with the mold of society to the periphery. The smoke rises between those forming walls so high they split the sky like slit wrists, and then the stars fall like blood, and we're left with nothing but a death wish. It's this dichotomy that forces us towards the death drive, a constant search for existence with the hope that maybe we can survive. The only method of survival is a politics of illegibility. Only our option to avoid being targeted is by being illegible. We must remain illegible because that is what will always allow us to remain. They say culture is good, but doctor, our insanity is not that we see people who aren't there. It's that we ignore those who are till we find ourselves scarred and ashamed walking into the emergency rooms at 3 a.m. flooded with a pain we cannot name or explain because we are bleeding from the outside in. Skin is not impervious. Cultures built on greed and destruction do not pick and choose who they kill. This is the method of debate. It is who best performs a methodology of a politics of ontology of becoming. Only that method it allows us to break from the cultures that have defined us as bodies that don't matter. It is only that method that allows us to break free of what we are told to be. There's a larger uniqueness question here. Thank God for denial. Thank God we can afford the makeup to pile upon the face of it all. Look at the pretty world. Look at the smiling people in the sky with a missile between her teeth and a steeple through her heart. Wake me when the American dream is over. There is a meta level question. The debate community and the status quo is securitized against these certain bodies. Even from the time that we stepped through the door, we were securitized by those who wish to define and eliminate our bodies. Daily impacts this that such the educational leaders look for ways to group and stereotype those who break from the norms in order to maintain and silence and this control of subjugation is the root cause of the boundaries of inclusion and exclusion. Only the ethics of uncertainty destroys the paradigm of those boundaries by transforming those spaces. The reconfiguration of epistemology is the one you see allows alternatives to emerge instead of filtering that out. They say queerness flattens difference. We don't say that you can't remember the lived realities, but know why those realities exist. The evidence contextualizes this as a root cause that the only root cause is heteronormativity. It's the method by which modernity defines what is and is not acceptable. It's the root of logic that defines what belongs and what should be eliminated. It's not a question of how that heteronormativity oppresses, whether through capitalism, patriarchy, or whiteness, but why it does. The process of othering creates individuals and communities based on those social markers and deems them less important. Heteronormativity creates hegemonic forces through that process of normalization. The one you see takes a broader question of whether or not those communities should continue to allow that normalization to construct or reproduce the standard of desirability. It is the center of invisible norms that allows a privilege that can take several and contradictory forms, unmarked as the basic idiom of the personal and the social. They say that they can never become fully fluid because they have a level of security right on their skin. This is a claim the one I see identifies with it. It's a question of how institutions view that marking on your skin. Is a question of whether or not you should allow those identities to be forced upon you if you don't want them. You say that you have you are never allowed to be identified as a black woman. The one I see is a rupture from the things that tell you you cannot identify that way. Let's go to the cat.
Oh, they say queer can't become fully fluid?
Yeah, I just say it. They don't access a root cause claim. There's a larger question in the context of a logic that existed before white supremacist capital patriarchy, before there was the anti-blackness, before there was the oppression that was a logic to determine the system of order to rank human value. That's the Burke evidence. The act captures the discussion of differences and cross-eggs of the 1AC proves the Campbell impacts this. It's not a question of whether or not the 1AC has privilege to escape into culture, but whether or not that culture should even exist. They can never resolve the issue of queer securitized bodies in the status quo. The state is the ultimate side of giving the body its sex and gender. The constitution of gender is analogous to the constitution of the state. We can only understand the state as having no ontological status apart from the act which constitutes reality. The identity of any state should be understood issues coming to bodies and whiteness, existential conversion's implications for relationality. Existential conversion holds out the possibility that a newcomer may come to terms with the reality that whiteness is not absolute value, rejecting your whiteness, and solution she affirms the facility of blacks, but transcendence as well. The serious coil of whiteness can be opposed, which had previously took to be inevitable, has turned out to be particular historically contingent forms of prediction upon white performative repetitions or repair them instead of both in the crumble of white supremacist lies, existential conversion of whiteness, a constant affirmation of new forms of responsiveness, forms of challenging on the earth, religious and attempted to found anti-whiteness values. Existential conversion must involve a self-reflexive way of being in the world, and there, Bell Hooks evidence is all about how African communities were able to develop in spite of slavery and white modes of anti-blackness, which contradicts with their Wilderson evidence that makes the claim that mode is inevitable. That upholds queer theory's claim that the individuals can reclaim their own agency because it is an internal process. Calvin negative impacts this as saying the affirmative is a prerequisite to that process. The negative also says that they should be able to call on the state, which contradicts also with their Wilderson evidence. Blackness is always fungible. The state can never be a repository for helping, but will always treat blackness as negative. It means that the desecuritization process, the 1AC, is key to solve. They say that the black body should be the center, but many identities are securitized. It's a question of how we go to the point of modernity. The act criticizes the violence is starting at modernity, which means that all questions of agency should start with the 1AC.
Okay, can you explain where, at the last part you were talking about Wilderson, agency, and a little bit of this stuff? You go on that.
Well, the first argument was like the Bell Hooks evidence is about how poetry, spirituality was able to allow that scared me. Allowed African communities to be able to develop and create their own agency. That sort of bolsters our claim.
It said it was a way of combating white supremacy.
Yeah, we argue that that means that anti-blackness and fungibility isn't necessarily always inevitably internalized. That reclaiming of agency is an internal process that can happen.
Let's talk about agency. Like she just says the way as like shielding.
That's our extrapolation.
Okay.
And then the second argument was that your articulation in cross-ex that we should be able to rely on the state contradicts with
Did we say we should be able to rely on the state, or did my partner specifically say that there's times when we should be able to call on the state? She specifically said in the status quo, there are times when they do not come and so forth, but does that mean we shouldn't be able to call?
We should not call on the state, we should burn it down. That is both what Wilderson and our evidence speaks to.
We don't read that.
But has Wilderson done it?
Talk about burning down the thing. You know, Wilderson's full of shit anyways, but I'm going to say.
Okay,
did you read
Did
Did you read the Dino 3?
No, she did not.
Okay, thanks.
You can answer that.
Okay, also, you talk about how like we need to rupture like this politics as usual, and like explain to me how you rupture the being.
So we advocate an ontology of becoming. There's a difference between an ontology of being, which is like static, where institutions map or trace out bodies, institutions, positions, etc. We advocate an ontology of becoming, that we can recreate and subjectively become in every instance ourselves and not be, put on by those structures.
Okay, but when I asked you how he depicts or how he chooses who wins the debate, you said whoever ruptures being, so.
Yeah, whoever embraces an ontology of becoming.
Okay.
That's also our role of the ballot.
Okay.
The reason I'm answering questions
Okay,
is
but
my
how does
partner just
that,
lost her
like,
voice.
how do you actually do that?
We think that the judge's ballot is an affirmation of that. We think using things like poetics and critiquing institutions like debate and academia, our Halberstam evidence says that we need to critique those things both in form and content, and we have done both of those.
Okay, cool.
Can you talk at all?
You have anything?
Basically,
Okay, that's fine.
well, hold on. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, you said the 1AC is a rejection of the status that makes anti-blackness, so I'm really not understanding what exactly you want.
Well, the 1AC is a criticism of modernity and of mapping out bodies based on physical or ontological characteristics. We would say that both those things comprise aspects of anti-blackness that was started by like thoughts of the Enlightenment, thoughts of modernity, etc. And that the 1AC is a criticism of that.
9-10.